Gary, we are live.
All right, thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Architectural Review Board meeting. This evening, I will be filling in for our chair. Kathy Bryan is ill. There will be 4 members of our board present this evening to discuss the issues. I want to thank Nicole and the staff for putting together this chair agenda. I will be reading much of the agenda, so please bear with me. Good evening and welcome to a virtual meeting of the City of Dublin Architectural Review Board. The Ohio legislature passed several emergency laws to address the pandemic, including the ability for public entities to have virtual meetings. We appreciate the ability to maintain our continuity of government. For the present time, we are holding our meetings online and live streaming those meetings on YouTube. You can access the live stream on the city's website. The meeting procedure for each case this evening will begin with a staff presentation, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. The board will then have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions prior to hearing public comments. Finally, the board will deliberate on each case. In order to submit any questions or comments during the meeting, please use the form under the streaming video on the city's website. These questions and comments will be relayed to the board by the meeting moderator. We want to accommodate public participation to the greatest extent possible and welcome your comments on cases. Please use a valid name and address when submitting your comments and refrain from making any inappropriate comments. This is not a perfect system, but we appreciate your patience. We're going to begin the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. So the flag will be displayed shortly, and then we will start with the pledge. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay. Judy, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Cotter?
Here.
Mr. Alexander?
Here.
Mr. Kalnacki?
Here.
And Ms. Cram?
Here.
Kathy, are you here? Okay, all right. Is there a motion to accept the documents into the record and approve the meeting minutes from the December 16th, 2020 meeting?
I can make the motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Sean,
Miss-
thank you.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Mr. Kalnacki?
Yes.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes. The Architectural Review Board is responsible for review of construction modifications or alteration to any site in the review district or area subject to the architectural review under the provision of the Zoning Code Section 153.177. The board has the decision-making responsibility on these cases. A swearing in of anyone who intends to address the board on any of these cases is necessary. Anyone intending to address the board on cases, please stand, raise your right hand, and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board?
Yes.
Thank you. This evening, tonight, we have no cases that are eligible for the consent agenda. The agenda order will be as published. Case 1, the Gadati residence at 185 South Riverview Street. Case 2, 40 North High Street. Case 3, Winans Addition at 4852 South High Street. And Case 4, 87 South High Street. Our first case is the Gadati residence at 185 South Riverview Street. This is a minor project review. The application is a request for construction of a new 3,400 square foot single family residence on a 0.41 acre site zoned Bridge Street District Historic Residential. The site is west of South Riverview, approximately 375 feet north of the intersection with Short Street. Ms. Martin will be our presenter, and I'll give you a moment to set up your presentation.
That looks like the wrong one.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you for your patience tonight. This is a request for review and approval of a minor project review for the construction of a new single-family residence on a 0.41 acre site located on the west side of South Riverview Street, just north of the intersection with Short Street. The surrounding context is as shown on the screen. The photo in the upper left-hand corner is the property immediately to the north, while the photo in the lower right-hand corner is the property immediately to the south. The two properties on the right-hand side of your screen are located on the east side of South Riverview Street, across the street and adjacent to the Scioto River. This is the existing condition of the site. You'll notice here that the previous structure is no longer on the site. A bit of case history, as well as identifying the updates that have been made for this meeting. The demolition of the previous structure was initially approved in June of 2020. Subsequently, the applicant came before the Architecture Review Board informally for feedback on construction of this single-family home. The feedback at the September meeting was generally positive and identified opportunities for improvement, including exterior materials and treatment of roof lines and building height. The updates that the applicant has made include masonry-clad chimneys, reduction in the height of the garage, greater separation between the garage and the primary structure, and the preservation of the rear yard as the setbacks have been slightly modified. The previous and proposed site plans are shown on the screen. You'll notice here there are substantial similarities. This proposal is for a home that has a footprint of approximately 3,000 square feet. It includes the primary residence as well as the attached 3-car garage and enclosed 3-season room, as well as a large at-grade patio. The total lot coverage permitted in this district is 50%, and 50% lot coverage is proposed. The setbacks proposed from South Riverview Street are substantial, as well as the rear yard setback exceeding the 15-foot requirement. The southern and northern setbacks are in line with the permitted side yard setbacks. The elevations have been included in this presentation from September as well as January for each side of the structure. You'll notice here the applicant has progressed the design from conceptual on the left-hand side of your screen to more graphic and computer-oriented in nature. You'll see here that the previously siding-clad chimney is now veneer. This structure is a 1.5-story agricultural character hall and parlor structure with an offset entrance. Many of the details remain the same with the modification to eliminate the box bay window on the front facade of the home. The applicant has refined the primary exterior cladding materials to a cultured limestone with buttered joints, as well as vertical tongue and groove siding on many of the other facades. The applicant has yet to refine details regarding doors and light fixtures, although it is anticipated that the light fixtures will be gas light fixtures. The north elevation of the structure, which is accessed by the curvilinear driveway here, includes a more visible view of the masonry clad chimney, the elimination of another box bay window, the separation of the attached garage from the primary structure with a connector stoop, and the removal of the barn window shutters. Here you'll see the vertical tongue and groove siding on both the primary structure as well as the garage. Those are proposed to be finished in 2 different stains, a dove gray as well as a brown gray. This is the south elevation of the structure. You also see masonry chimneys in this elevation, as well as modified windows and roof lines. The applicant did receive feedback at the September meeting regarding the convergence of roof lines located on the hall and parlor side gable structure. This remains largely unchanged, although the applicant has provided hidden elevations per the board's request. The rear elevation of the home includes the modifications shown on the screen with the removal of the window as indicated in red. A conceptual mass and form of the proposed home. This is a view from the southeast side of the home and shows the convergence of various roof lines as well as the enclosed 3-season room. As previously mentioned, materials have been finalized. The applicant is proposing a composite slate style shingle with select application of 16-inch standing seam, as well as the stone and vertical siding in the materials shown on the screen. Additionally, in your packet, the applicant provided a detail for window installation in both siding and masonry facades. Based on the information provided, staff is conditioning that the applicant provide true simulated divided light windows, as it was unclear in the submittal. These windows will all be in a dark bronze finish. In review of the minor project review criteria, the board order standards of review, as well as the alterations to building structures and sites within the historic district, staff is recommending approval this evening with 2 conditions as shown on the screen. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, the applicant and the applicant's representative are here as well this evening.
Does anyone have any questions for Nikki? It appears there are none. Mr. Taylor, would you like to make a presentation?
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thanks again for hearing this. I know this is our 3rd time here, and we're taking up a lot of your time, but it's been really helpful to us to meet with you and to get your feedback as we go along here, and hopefully we've got this thing down to the point where we're all going to agree on it. We had planned to make this presentation at the December meeting, but we need a little bit more time to explore costs on a few items before we asked for your approval. So thanks again for allowing us to delay this for a month, and thanks for your patience. As Nikki said, the project we're presenting is almost the same as what we presented to you in September, with a number of changes that primarily are in response to the board's comments from the September meeting. One was the addition of an open porch and a step down of the roof on the north side between the house and the garage to kind of enhance the visual separation between the masses on the north side. We also reduced the height of the garage roof. It's approximately 32 inches lower than the main house roof. We did reduce the number of roofing materials from the previous 3 to just 2 in this presentation. As Nikki mentioned, we changed the chimney materials from siding to stone. We pulled the house forward a little bit to make it better aligned with the adjacent homes and, as Nikki said, preserve some of the backyards. And then I know someone had asked at the meeting last time about that hidden elevation on the garage, so I did throw that in there, and you can see that shed dormer that we have on the back there. This presentation also includes more detail on the drawings, and we've included some images of the materials that we're incorporating into the project. I want to note that the colors of the siding and the trim and the stone that we have on there are as close as we can get at this point, but because they're going to be custom, that's our intent, but the final colors and the textures could vary slightly because our intent is to build sample boards out on the site and use that as our guide. So if it's your pleasure to condition this upon seeing the sample boards on the site, I'm fine with that. So the final area calculations that Nikki presented, she said we're at 50%. My calculations, so we're at 49.4, but I won't quibble over that. I do want to point out, however, that that's a little bit of a misleading number because included in those calculations is almost 3,000 square feet of driveway. Our driveway is 190 feet long, and that counts against us in the development number. We need that driveway, obviously, because we've pushed the garage all the way to the back of the lot. It was either that or have it at the front, which I don't think anybody would want. I did some quick calculations just for comparison purposes. And if this were a corner lot and we could exit in the side yard, we'd have obviously a much smaller driveway. And by my numbers, we'd actually come out well below 40% in the lot coverage. So other than that, we're in agreement with staff's conditions regarding the light fixtures, the doors and the windows. And that's all I've got. Thank you again.
Thank you. Members of the board, do you have any questions for Mr. Taylor or Nikki?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm here, actually.
Okay. Is there any public comment?
I do have 2 items of public comment that I can read into the record for you. So the first is from Denise King at 170 South Riverview Street, Dublin, Ohio, 43017. And she writes, the historic Dublin community, the ARB and staff have worked hard over the years to establish the new historic district guidelines. These instructions for development in the historic district provide instruction on the mass, scale, lot coverage, height, and setback of new structures in the historic district. I am glad to see that the new home proposed at 185 respects the guidelines instructions that the setback be the same as adjoining structures in order to maintain the pastoral character which draws owners and visitors to South Riverview. Along with setback, mass, scale, lot coverage, and height are all critical to the character of the historic district. Thank you. And then the second is from Steve Rudy at 129 South Riverview Street, Dublin, Ohio, 43017. And he writes, Dear ARB, referring to the proposed new home at 185 South Riverview Street. While the proposed home is in accordance with the new pattern, large, long homes, it does not follow the existing pattern, namely it leaves no green space. Therefore, the new residents will be able to enjoy green space on neighboring properties, but cuts off sight lines and views of green space for residents of neighboring properties. The proposed layout thus reduces the property values, or at the very least, the quality of life enjoyed of neighboring properties. It imposes a win-lose trade-off. More restraint is required in the residual historic district. And that's all the public comment I have at this time.
Thanks, Jack. Okay, now it's our time for discussion. Board members, how do you feel? Amy, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So my first thing is related to the siding. It had been brought up in the consultant report too. The front of the building is pretty much divided into two halves. So we have the stone half and the original stone house, and then what would have been like, I guess, an addition to the south. And in my opinion, the addition to the south, it needs to be all one material. So right now, the front and half of the side is stone, and the other half of the side and the rear is siding. In theory, it's kind of, what I'm saying is like, it's kind of, so either make it all stone or all siding. I just don't think they would have built that south end and done 1.5 sides, one siding and the other 1.5 a different. So hopefully that makes sense. So it doesn't matter to me which one, all stone or all siding, I would just pick one. And then as far as just the rest of the design, I'm okay with the consultant keeps mentioning the multiple roof lines there and that south side front corner. I'm fine with that. That doesn't bother me. I am slightly concerned with the 3-dimensional figure drawing that was given to us. The pitch of the roof on the connector looks extremely steep compared to all the other roof lines. It looks very narrow and steep. So, I mean, the preference would be that the pitch of that roof would be a similar ratio to, say, the garage, which is that's on the same axis. But as that drawing shows, it just, to me, it looks off. My last comment was I preferred the first garage versus this garage. I really don't like that the garage, we actually made the building longer between this revision and the other revision. I mean, a personal preference. I liked the earlier version that didn't have that rear. I guess it was described as an exercise room that adds to the kind of fills in that gap there on that south side. So, I mean, I know that's a space that the client wants and they want their exercise room, but my preference was the original version without it. I think that covers everything I have on my list here.
What I might do is have, if Sean and Frank have similar comments, get all of our comments and then ask Mr. Taylor, go one by one and ask Mr. Taylor if he'd like to respond to that. Okay. Sean, how do you feel?
So for me, I think in general, I think it's a good rendition from what we talked about last time. Siding, I see Amy's point on the two different things there. The one other point, I think the windows and all the things in the consultant report, I don't have so much of an issue with. Certainly the roof lines, I think from the south side look a little strange. There's 3 different pitches. But the one thing, and maybe Amy could ask, because certainly from the first rendition to the second one, it looks like the chimney did get bigger. Maybe that's just an optical illusion, or the chimney, and certainly they had a mention of the cap. So I looked around. I say the cap does look a little bigger than I would see in other places. I don't have a significant issue, but certainly that chimney compared to the other one looks bigger than it was. So to be quite honest, the rest of it, I don't have so many other comments other than that.
Okay, thanks. Frank, how about you?
The only thing I want to add is Amy pointed out some great points. Amy's right in the idea that if it was an addition, you wouldn't have 2 different materials just because of the age you're trying to be. It's actually more suburban. I guess we'd have a front facade versus a side facade or a different material. But I mean, other than that, it came in at the 50%, or as the architect said, just under 49.9 or 4, whatever he said. So really, as far as I can say, I'm happy with the setbacks. That's coming in line with the rest of the houses. And I think that the caps on the chimney, though, I just actually had this done this summer. I think that's almost the standard now. But Gary, you might know more to that than I do. I know they had to put one on my house. It looks almost exactly like the one in the drawing. Oh, that's it. I have nothing else to add.
Okay. I guess I'll add my feelings before we ask Mr. Taylor to respond. I think Ms. Nicole was accurate in her staff report saying that the majority of the feedback at the last meeting was positive and affirmative. I think I was in the minority at that meeting and will probably be in the minority here. So I'm going to state my case, but I'm also going to try. I have a feeling this could be approved without my vote tonight, and so my goal is to help that process along, because I don't think anybody was in agreement with my point at the last meeting. But I do think they need to be made for the record, because for me, I don't see how this meets two of the primary standards that are listed, and I'm going to reach for our design guidelines. And our design guidelines state the building site should be designed to be consistent with the original block, street, or site patterns of the district in which the building is located. Okay, that pattern in a historic setting like this is houses tight to the street, open space behind, and maybe a building, an outbuilding behind. So what I think is not consistent here is the way the mass of this house is distributed across the site. And the pattern, and there are two issues. That's the one issue. But also when you look at the coverage of the building. Now, it meets the zoning, and this is different than the zoning. It does meet the zoning. But the coverage, when we calculated the average of houses in the district, the average is about the average footprint. This doesn't include second floor living space, but the average footprint is 2,200, a little over 2,200 square feet, or 16.23% of the lot coverage. Now, that makes for, by putting all the square footage on the ground floor, that makes for a large footprint on the site. So, and that also is one of the reasons why it's long and doesn't allow for space to pass through the site. And this pattern that I mentioned of the way houses in historic districts are sited is consistent if you go to Old Worthington, where they have lots similar to these, and you go to the historic districts in Columbus and Clintonville and South Arlington and Bexley. It's a pattern that you see that's consistent in districts of this period. So that's why I'm a little uncomfortable with it. And actually, if you look at the examples the consultant provided in her report, she showed examples of buildings that have additions that are long legs, and that's true. And we have a lot of those. I before I make this point, I want to make an exception, and in fairness to the applicant. The two exceptions to this, and that's part of what Mr. Rudy, I think, is referring to, both on Penny Hill. Those are not, they're both sides are on Penny Hill. Those are not original buildings. Those are buildings that have been modified. And those are buildings that are atypical in terms of the development pattern. So, but the consultant, and a good example is the Donato's building that she shows in her report. That has a long leg like the proposed structure here. But that long leg doesn't even go to the midpoint of the lot. So the long leg is similar, but it doesn't, you still have space moving back through the lot. And, personally, I'd hope that maybe we would get the garage detached, and then we would get some space through here. I know the applicant has, I can tell from the roof line change, which I appreciate. I know Mr. Taylor was listening to comments, and I understand too, sometimes you have clients, you're balancing what the clients want to do with certain standards. and I know Mr. Taylor lowered that roof at the entry to the garage as a way of responding to comments that were made about that connection. So I do see a lot of efforts to respond to some of the comments that were made. But I'm just, uncomfortable with this really meeting that 5.2 in the guidelines. And you don't, like Mr. Rudy's comment, I was on the, we've had other people come to our meetings prior to the appointment of the three of you, questioning those long houses that block the space. So you don't need to be an architect or, an urban designer to see there's something different here. The neighbors are aware when these are built that there is something different here. So I'm trying, my comments are based on that. I think in one sense, you could make the point, this does look like a house when you look at the surfaces and materials that make sense in the district. And some of the details, I really appreciate some of the details that Mr. Taylor has provided for us. But I wanted that to be on the record because based on your earlier comments, I think it's possible for them to get an approval, and maybe it tonight with your votes. But I also want to let Mr. Taylor respond, and also if you could respond to not just my comments, but probably more importantly the comments of Amy. And Sean's question about the chimney. So, Mr. Taylor, I'll let you respond here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Alexander. I appreciate the opportunity to respond. Specifically, Ms. Cram's comments on the south gables. You could look at this as that there are two additions to the main house, if you like, but that arrangement and those material arrangements were in both of the other previous applications, presentations, and that wasn't brought up. So I feel a little blindsided bringing that up at the last meeting once we've pretty much been given the okay to proceed with more detailed drawings. As far as the roof pitch, if I'm understanding Mrs. Cram's comments, there are all of the roof pitches on the house are identical, except for the garage roof, which is the pitch is lowered slightly, but the long connecting piece is the same pitch as the entire house. Now I apologize if that 3D view didn't make that clear. Mrs. Cram also commented that she preferred the old garage. I'm looking at the two drawings side by side, and there are only two differences that I can see, unless she's referring to something else. One is we took some windows out, and the second is on the north elevation, we removed the shutters from the upper windows. Are those the things that you were referring to there?
Actually, no. My personal preference was not having that exercise room addition on the south side. Because now it gets closer to the screen. There's something added that gets closer in that courtyard to the screen porch. So that extra room there was not there before. And the other one was the garage, how it attached to. I liked how it attached previously because it didn't. Your new attachment actually makes the building longer.
Well,
that's why I preferred the first version without the exercise room and not the additional.
Okay, well, that's my misunderstanding because I thought you said garage. Nikki, can you show the north elevation side by side? Because that's where the real intent to create the difference was, that connecting piece between the house and the garage. And that was, again, I think it was a good idea to do that, but that was something that came up in the last meeting.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a personal preference thing. So it's not critical to me. And regarding the siding, before it looked like the farthest south gabled line on that front half was a completely separate addition. Like you said, it was an addition to an addition. So it was fine if it would be all clad, but on the rendering, on the one that shows it sharing the same roof line. So we just
Yep,
skipped
you almost
that
had it.
one. It's sharing the exact same roof line. So therefore, to me, that means it's part of that same construction. It was all constructed at once. So if it was all constructed at once, I would think it would all need to have the same siding material. So actually your 3D rendering is what's throwing me off. I was completely fine without the 3D rendering.
Mrs. Cram, I see your point. I appreciate that. And just let me throw this out here. Is that important on an interior face of an interior lot?
I don't, it's not, these aren't totally critical, like, and I guess it's just, those were my points as to how, like, again, the 3D rendering is what's throwing me off. In general, I like it. The length I'm okay with because it is not, there's no alley, unlike the ones on, was it Kinney and even on the one north at Spring Hill or Eberly. Those are really long and they're right on an alley, so you can really see it. This one, you're not going to see it. You're not going to see the back and stuff. So the front is the most important to me. And the front, I'm very happy with. So.
Mr. Cotter commented about the chimney being big. That's not a critical issue. If we need to make it smaller, we can. My only comment in that regard is, you know, I'd like to have a little bit of latitude to enhance some of these features of the house and not just make them look like every other house and just copy historic. I mean, we were told to avoid false historicism. And if this chimney is bigger than they would have done 150 years ago, then that seems to me that that's satisfying that. And Mr. Alexander, as far as your two comments about the consistent patterns and the overall size of the footprint, I mean, you did bring this up at the last meeting, but as you said and recognized, you were in the minority, so. And you're muted.
You're muted, Gary.
I'm sorry. I realize that, and I also understand the direction this may be going. So I just felt like I need to make the point. I do think it's an important point, and we have, as I said, we have heard from people who've lived in this community for a while that they're not pleased with these kind of changes. So I'm also trying to be responsive to that. So that being said, I want to ask before we make, I want to kind of take a straw poll to get a sense of how you feel. But my sense is that Sean, I know Amy basically said she supports what's being proposed, and it sounds like Sean and Frank, you're generally comfortable with what you're seeing.
But certainly, Gary, I think to your point, I mean, we've talked about this in the last 3-4 months. The houses, okay, as they tend to be story and a half, people want the space, right? So we end up with these houses that get longer, or they get longer, and B, they take up more lot space, right? And I think we have a case coming up very soon that has a similar issues. So I think these are things, and these are things that certainly we need to wrestle with, because this won't be the last time.
And I will say, this house on a different lot might not work. I think it works here because it is not along an alley. You do not see this from an alley at the rear or the sides. I mean, you're really only seeing the front of this house. So, I mean, I do agree that we have some houses that are way too long, and even this one might not work on a different lot, but I'm okay with it on this lot. And as far as its siting on the lot, it does a very good job staying in line with the other houses to either side. And that's what some residents have brought up about this portion of Riverview Street. That's what they want, and they were able to accommodate that.
And for me, that's the reason I tend to agree with Amy here. I think it fits on the lot, but it certainly, when people look, if they're in the back of their house and they're looking down their back lot, something now starts to be in the way, and it's something I think we wrestle with later. But I think with Mr. Taylor, I mean, putting I think 30+ feet in the back and having the front, I think helps mitigate some of that, those challenges that certainly the neighbor, well, at least one neighbor may have with that. So I think it's a pretty, for me, it's a good compromise around that.
Okay. Frank, how about you?
No, I don't have anything else really to add.
Okay.
Following the letter of the law, basically, with that.
Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to approve this with the two conditions? I think Mr. Taylor's already said that he's fine with these conditions. Okay, thank you.
That's good. Okay. So I'll move to I'll move to approve the application with the two conditions proposed by staff.
And I can second.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Mr. Kanaki,
Yes, please.
Mr. Alexander,
No?
Mr. Cotter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Good luck.
And I'll see you in February.
Okay. All right, our next case is 40 North High Street. This is an informal review. This application is a request for review and feedback to construct a second-story addition to an existing one-story building and a new three-story apartment building on a 0.21 acre site zoned Bridge Street District Historic Core. The site is located east of North High Street, 125 feet south of North Street. Ms. Martin will be our presenter. So Nikki, if you'd like to get your presentation up.
Great, good evening. As mentioned, this is a request for review and non-binding feedback for a future proposal for 40 North High Street. The site is just over 0.2 acres in size and is located on the east side of North High Street, immediately south of North High Brewing. The site is also adjacent to the Dublin Columbus Metropolitan Library. This is the existing site plan. You'll note here that the site is highlighted in yellow. There is an existing historic stone wall that bisects the site, which is highlighted in blue. You will note that a portion of the stone wall is located beyond the bounds of the site and on the property to the north, identified as lot 129 here. The site is presently developed with a gravel parking lot shown in gray, as well as an existing one-story office building. The portion of the gravel parking lot and drive aisle located south of the bounds of the site is shared with the property located at lot 129. Presently, the site circulation is one way in from the south drive and one way out from the north drive. The parking lot is unimproved and includes no designated or striped parking spaces. Additionally, on the east side of the stone wall that bisects the site, there is informal parking on a gravel lot. This is the existing structure on the site. The structure was built in 1956 and is considered contributing to the local historic district. You'll notice here that the structure is of concrete block construction with a front gable, low pitch roof with overhanging eaves and a recessed entry. Images are also provided of the structure to the rear. You'll notice a slight grade change as you move toward the east, as well as the gravel parking lot. These are the existing conditions of both the stone wall and historic outhouse located on the property to the south, as well as the informal parking area located along North Blacksmith Lane. This historic stone wall was built by the Wing family. The Wing family were stonemasons for whom Wing Hill is named. The integrity of this stone wall is presently compromised. The site is zoned Bridge Street District Historic Core and is located north of East Bridge Street. The zoning district identifies permitted uses as well as development standards. Development standards in commercial districts are regulated by building type. Each zoning district permits certain building types based on the location and surrounding development character. Development standards identified by building type are as follows. The proposed two-story addition to the existing office building would be designated under the historic mixed-use building type. This is a permitted building type within the district and has development standards as follows. The proposal would meet all development standards as identified here. Additionally, the detached three-story apartment building located to the rear of the site would be designated under the single-family attached requirement. Single-family attached is not a permitted building type in historic core, although is the most appropriate form for the development proposed. The setbacks are identified on the screen. Due to the conceptual nature of this proposal, we are not able to determine if all development standards would be met, although the size and scale of the proposal is consistent with the maximum building height, and there may be opportunities to comply with lot coverage provided semi-pervious pavement is included. This is the proposed site plan in detail. So you'll notice here that the existing structure and its footprint remains with the same site circulation. A two-story stair entry to a second floor addition is proposed. The lighter area to the west, or I'm sorry, the east, is a extension of the second floor addition over an existing parking lot, which will be improved with this application. And to the rear of the lot is a proposed three-story townhome apartment building with parking located on the first floor. The applicant has indicated that the intent is that all dental office patients would continue to park on site. A total of 5 parking spaces are able to be accommodated for the dental office, as well as 1 on-street parking space for a total of 6. 4 parking spaces, 2 per unit, are proposed for the apartment building for a total parking allotment of 10 spaces, where 18 spaces would be required. Should this application move forward, consideration of a parking plan would be required. The Architecture Review Board is asked to provide feedback on that this evening. You'll notice here, based on the proposed site layout, the 3-story apartment building would demolish and modify a portion of the historic stone wall. The Architecture Review Board is also asked to provide feedback on that this evening. The applicant has provided proposed massing. This proposed massing shows the modular nature of the existing architecture and how the proposed second-story addition, as well as detached townhomes, will build upon that. It's important to note here the tiered nature of the townhomes, with the garage protruding along Blacksmith Alley in a response to provide a contextual scale. The parking is located below the second-story extension with a cantilever appearance being supported by structural beams. The applicant has provided conceptual character images, with the images on the top being designated toward the office building and the images on the bottom designated to the townhomes. In the statement, the applicant has identified a desire to apply a Usonian aesthetic, which is typified by horizontal lines and warm natural materials in order to blend with the surrounding natural landscapes. This architectural style is proposed to build upon the existing mid-century elements as well as the materials. A number of discussion questions are proposed for the board's consideration. Is the board supportive of partial demolition of the historic stone wall? Does the board support a waiver to permit the single-family attached building type? Would the board be supportive of a parking plan? Does the board support the proposed site layout? Is the board supportive of the mass and scale of both the building addition and the townhomes? And finally, is the board supportive of the conceptual architectural character? And then, of course, any other considerations by the board. With that, I am happy to answer any questions. Both the applicant as well as the applicant's representative are here this evening to speak to the proposal.
Does anyone have any questions for Nikki?
Yeah, I just maybe make a couple clarifying questions just for me. Just on the back section, there's the new build going into the north of where the structure would be. Are those going to be residential? I have to admit, I went by, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, so the construction happening to the north of this property is the previously approved Cohatch project. That will be a co-working space with opportunities for work-oriented gatherings.
Okay.
So no residential, to answer your question.
Okay, right. Okay, that's what I said. Because I mean, just for me, if you look at the bridge, if the districts, so certainly a permitted use in the core is live, work, and multiple family. But in the district, which building type would fit one of those? Because as you try to figure out what you pick detached. I was just trying to reconcile those things because there is a permitted use, but it was hard for me to reconcile what building type would fit that permitted use. I mean, as we thought through that.
Yeah, so it's foreseeable that multifamily would be appropriate to use the historic mixed-use building type.
Okay.
Given the form of this being attached, not necessarily for sale single family, but insular single family, as one person would live in each half.
Okay, so mixed use would be this type of residential, then we put it in there. Okay, yep.
Hey, Nikki, on that same line, do you know how tall the building to the north is going to be?
I believe the building to the north is just shy of 45 feet in height.
Okay, so are they calling it 2 stories or 2.5?
Having been on the board when we approved that, it's 2.5.
2.5?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question is, so in theory, this is being rezoned as historic core with the new guidelines that are now going to City Council, correct?
Yes, so this would be rezoned from Bridge Street District Historic Core to Historic District Historic Core.
Right. So what was can you recall the lot coverage percentage in the new rezoning?
Yes, if you just give me one.
I mean, you don't have it memorized?
I sincerely apologize. Why don't you continue and I will provide this for you in just one moment.
That was my last question.
I recognize Dan. Mr. Morgan, would you like to make a presentation at this point?
Sure.
Okay.
I'd love to. I would love to. Thank you for having us. Really happy to be here, and we're really excited to be doing another project in the historic district. Looking to nice collaboration with you all. So thank you for your time and your efforts from this point moving forward. I want to start with one question, and Mr. Cotter, you started to bring it up a little bit, was the distinction on the Blacksmith Alley building, whether it's a single family attached, which is a non-permitted use, versus an apartment building, which is more along the lines of what we were talking about conceptually earlier on, and that is being a permitted use. I would like to hear a little bit more clarification on the difference between, or the board's opinion on the difference between an apartment and a single family attached. Also, the just general concept that we started from at the very beginning of this plan was we have the straightforward office building, dental office building, more of a pancake structure, very simple, vertical concrete block walls with a flat roof. I believe that the pitch roof was a later addition after re-roofing. I believe originally the building had a flat roof. And the idea being that to grow that office, take up some of the space. We do have a lot coverage. I think our permitted lot coverage in the district is actually 85%. And thinking we have this great parking, we have parking available. Parking's a premium. It's going to be mostly impermeable anyhow. Let's see if we can actually create a covered parking area and cover that actually with the building. So we're not just having lot coverage with pavement, but lot coverage with actual usable space. And it is early. The form of the building is. This is why we're doing this conceptual. We want to get your input, involve you in the process before we start getting into the design of how this second story cantilever or concept will actually eventually look. We're trying to maximize as much green space as we can, keeping in mind that we have parking and clearances from the existing building, but we have some green space, little pocket parks, or not pocket parks rather, but little pocket terraces for the apartment structure. We pulled Nikki started talking about the proposed massing of the 2.5, 3-story apartment building, with the idea of trying to bring the scale down. We pulled the garage. We want to pull the garages out towards the street so that it actually steps back in scale in relationship to the other buildings on the alley. I think that is shown clearest in the conceptual site section. So the taller mass of the apartment buildings will be set back from the street, kind of scaling down from High Street back onto Riverview. Further, going back to the site plan, we stepped it back from the Blacksmith Alley, but we also pinched it in from to the north to the south to expose that retaining wall. So you'll have views of the tuck pointed restructured retaining wall. It is, as Nikki pointed out, it is in compromised condition, and that we recently cleared it and got some good pictures of it to submit with this submittal. And it needs some significant tuck pointing, and Dr. LaPierre has invested money in keeping the parking lot from sinking, but that is a losing battle when the wall is in this type of disrepair. And as you mentioned in the report, Nikki, that site wall, you see it scoots past our site to the south and actually gets onto the adjacent neighbor's property before it makes it just slightly, like maybe 85-degree or 88-degree angle towards High Street till it makes its way up to support that existing 2-story outhouse. That portion of the wall is probably the most disrepair. So we would definitely, should this proposal move forward, we do definitely want to coordinate with our neighbors to the south on remedying that portion of the wall. Other than that, we're looking forward to hearing some feedback from the board on our general concept, massing, and excited to get forward with some design ideas.
I'm sure we're going to. Does anybody have any questions initially for Dan? I'm sure when we go through those points, we're going to have a series of questions for both Dan and Nikki when we go through all those points. I thought that Nikki did a great job of laying out the different items. Why don't we work our way through those? And then if we're not addressing everything at the end of those discussion, those bullet points, we can come back and hit on other things. I think Mr. Morgan's question about our preference, apartment versus single family, we can address. It's up there essentially implied in number 2. So we'll address that. I don't know, Nikki, have you had a chance to check that coverage number yet?
Yes, I have. So in the, apologies, in the proposed rezoning, the coverage would be reduced to 85% flat. Right now, the coverage is 85% plus an semi-pervious allowance
Okay,
for a total of 90.
thank you. Would you mind putting the bullet points back up, and then we'll start our discussion as we and work our way through those? All right, let's talk about the wall. Feelings about partial demolition of the stone wall.
I can
can-
go first. This is Amy. Yeah, I don't support a partial demolition of the wall. If it's if you can bring proof of total disrepair, a cost analysis, a structural analysis, and prove it needs to be demolished, then we demolish it. But I strongly hope we can keep the wall.
I can go because I had the same first look. I went and looked at it over the weekend, and for me, the preference is not to demolish the wall. I think, as Amy says, if you have the parking lot sinking into the river, well, okay, then we're gonna have to do something. I think you're right. If you start to partial, it's going to look strange if you butt the wall straight up to the building. I don't know. When I looked at, certainly my first choice is not to take the wall down, but okay, we can't have the building on the hill coming down either. So I think they said if there's a reason something has to happen, then we should look at that in more detail.
Frank, your feelings?
Yeah, I mean, basically the same. There's only one real historical element, really, at that site, and it's the wall built by the namesake of the street, up a street. So I don't know if there's an engineering report that has to be done as well with this. This is going to be beyond my knowledge. But yeah, I mean, saving the wall is obviously the last thing to really historically at that site. So it'd be not something we want to see gone.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that. I wish the wall could be kept. At the same time, I know in another district they might approve if the wall continued through the building and the wall as it was somehow incorporated within the new construction. But that may be unrealistic here. But to repair that wall probably is requiring and integrate it and to keep it with new construction around, it's probably going to require that wall to come down and be rebuilt. Because if it has to retain parking and retain the earth in a more stable way. So realistically, I mean, I think that's a question we may have to address at a later date. And Mr. Morgan can definitely add or we can get his input on this, but if you build near it, you're probably rebuilding it. Dan, do you have anything?
That's where that's kind of the path we went down and we led into it. And I think I'm sorry, Frank. I don't have your last name, Frank. So forgive me for.
Don't worry, go with it.
My first name. That was, the idea would incorporating, restructuring. We're going to have to take the wall down or basically put it back in place. Would incorporating it into the architecture. Right now we're kind of overlapping it with the idea that we might incorporate it in, but that came up in some early conversations that Dr. Lapierre and I had for the project. But would that be something that would be entertained by the board if it became less? It's definitely a feature of the site, and we're trying to protect as much of the feature of the site right now by giving glimpses of it. But if we were to restructure the wall and incorporate it fully into the design proposal, so it becomes maybe an interior wall or an element in the apartment building, would that be something that would maybe garnish board support? And that's A. And then B, of course, our next steps are to do a full structural investigation of the wall itself, and also the existing, the existing dental office, to make sure that we can feasibly build another story on top of it. That's the next step before we really go down into designing.
I can say, in my opinion, I would prefer that the wall be made structurally sound or rehabilitated and left in place. If you can reach the threshold we have to prove that something in the historic district that's historic needs demolished, if you reach that threshold with your structural analysis and all that, then I'll support demolition. What you decide to do, whether incorporate it or demolish it all and never see it again, I mean, that's, in my opinion, your call. But my preference is that the wall remains as a feature on the site as it is.
Okay. Let's move on to the second bullet point.
Can I interrupt real quick? Sorry, Gary.
Please do.
Nicole, do you have the pictures that Dan sent you of the wall on that corner, on the southeast corner of the wall? By any chance, the email that he sent?
Yeah, so I don't have his pictures, but let me pull up my pictures, and while I have these up, I will get his. Does that work for you all?
Sure.
The pictures that you're looking at, the one on the top left, you can kind of see it almost looks like somebody put a tiki bamboo thing there. That thing coming out of the wall right there is actually my sewer line that goes down through the area. And right along that sewer line, yeah, exactly where you're looking. That part of the wall is probably 6 to 12 inches away from the existing structure. And if you look at the top part where the kind of like maybe 3 feet in front of the white car, there is on the ground below is all the stone that I've been putting on there for years. It's coming through all of that or disrepaired wall right there. And one of those limestone blocks, I'm thinking is limestone, has fallen off into the parking lot, and the other ones are completely separated from all the rest of the wall. So I agree. I mean, I think that what Dan and I have talked about mostly was to try to preserve everything we can with the site. And I agree with Amy that I think that moving forward, we would need to have some way of preserving the fact that I don't want anybody to get hurt with the wall falling into the lower lot, or a car from the top lot where my car is going down into that lot from the wall breaking, especially if we're going to put anything structural on top of that to hold a second story cantilevered addition on top. The issue I have is the integrity of the wall being there. I don't know when the Wings built it, but to remain, let's say I didn't do anything, to have that wall there, that wall probably would need to be taken down and rebuilt just to hold my parking lot for my dental office, regardless of any additions, apartments, or on the second floor. So I just wanted to say that. And if she can find that picture, I mean, the whole that Dan sent, it's completely falling away from going from north to south. It's falling in the part that you can see just in front of my car. That's kind of a dark gray. That's buckled out probably about 8 inches, maybe 9 inches. Thank you.
Dr. LaPierre, just to emphasize the point that Amy made, there is a process for demolition. So, and so if something is in such bad shape that it can't be retained, or the cost of retaining it is so overwhelming, and you're rebuilding something that's now new, there is a process. So, and you ought to look at the process for that, because that might be something that's applicable to here.
Thank you.
Oh, Gary, you muted yourself.
Thank you. While we're looking maybe for another photograph, why don't we talk about the second point? And I think this will address Dan's earlier question about the attached, or the nature of residential in that location.
I can start. I support single family or a townhome of 2 units, whatever we call it, or what. I don't know if, I mean, I'm okay with a waiver for that type of use.
I agree. I'm with Amy.
Okay.
From a
think
waiver,
the que-
yeah, the same. I think from a waiver standpoint, it's okay. The massing
Yeah, I
for me
think-
may be a little different than, but waiver's okay.
And I would support that as well. I think putting residential in that location will also help reinforce the ability to maintain residential just to the east of that. So I think that that can help us in a lot of ways.
Oh, you're
You're
on muted.
muted again.
Somehow you keep muting yourself.
Yeah, sorry. I don't see the list. My memory's not that good. Can we put the list back up?
So the next one is, does the board support a parking plan to permit 10 parking spaces where 18 are required?
Okay.
My answer for that is yes, I support that.
Yeah, I mean, normally we hate waivers, but we also have brand new parking directly across the street, which isn't a big deal in this area. So I would support it as well.
And I'm the same. I mean, I think here you have to come with a parking plan when you bring it back the next time, but just making sure that, yeah, I don't know how many people go to the dentist at the same time and this, but I'm guessing that generally with the people who are working in there plus the patients, there's probably enough. But, you know, as you put the second floor on, how many offices are going to be there, just to make sure somehow it can make sense. I'm okay with the waiver, but when we get a little closer and trying to understand the mixed use above and things, just to make sure that we're consistent later when it comes up again, that we put half the parking spaces in that we need, just to make sure that, Mr. Morgan, when we come back with that there's a plan to say, yeah, we know that there's 5 people in the dentist office and this somehow works. Yeah, I agree. There's parking across the street, but just to make sure we understand what the waiver, why the waiver's there and how it makes sense in the context.
And I agree. I'm comfortable with the parking lot. The site layout. How do we feel about the proposed site layout?
I can start again. I like the site layout. I'm fine with, except for the issue with the wall. I think the wall needs to remain untouched, and so therefore you need to make your apartment or whatever we're calling it, your residential building, have a smaller footprint to not interfere with the wall. And I'd also want to make sure we keep the lot coverage in accord with what the new zoning is going to be by the time we move forward with this.
Sean or Frank?
Yeah, I'm go ahead, Frank.
Okay. We've already said, I mean, it's seeing what the structural engineer says about the wall, see what the wall could be incorporated. It could be a focal point for back there for all we know, make it something of interest. So, I'd like to, yes, move forward, and yes, let's see what the architect and engineer could come up with to try to maintain as much of that wall that we can or repair.
And I'm a bit the same. For me, I come back to a bit to the wall, because if you have to take the wall down, is the back of the building going to support the parking lot? So for me, are you going to put sheet piling it? I mean, I think if the wall stays, that's one thing. If the wall goes, I think for me, conceptually, I think we have to look at it a little closer, because certainly I wouldn't want you to put a concrete wall that's flat sitting up against there. Right. And if the building holds it up, I don't know. I'm having a hard time visualizing if the building is is holding up the wall, how that exactly looks. So, because you're going to have kind of that, you got green space sitting up there, and for me, it's okay. But I think some details around that just to help me understand how you're going to retain the side of the hill.
And I'm comfortable with the site layout. I think the grade change is definitely a point where it makes sense to change the buildings, to change the use, and the nature of those streets is so different that I think they'll support different uses and different types of building.
I also want to add, I didn't mention, there is a tree on that lot, like right smack in the center by that wall. I would want to know the condition of that tree and the size of that tree as well. I don't know that it's going to be practical to save it because it's an old tree and its roots are definitely going to go pretty far. My preference is always to save trees, especially in the historic district when it's a big old tree and there aren't too many others on that street. But when you come back, please bring information about the tree.
Will do.
Okay, and our next question is, is the board supportive of the mass and scale of the building addition and new townhomes? Sean or Frank, why don't you lead off this time?
I keep being polite and unclicking. Yeah, I mean, in general, my first thought was the height, but if this view, this is correct, then the height isn't an issue with the addition. So I think this is something that can be done. Start there since we're just in this initial proposal setting.
I'm saying, I mean, for me, I think if you look at the new building, just trying to understand what the front's going to look like. I see the conceptual things just to make sure from a character standpoint. I mean, you have North High Brewing on the one side and the smaller structure sitting on the other side. Yeah, okay. For me, I think the front of it's kind of nondescript now. So if it comes to a different, I think an evolution of that could be interesting. The massing looks okay. The cantilever, I actually kind of think it looks interesting. And then from the back, the second part, yeah, for me, first glance, it looks okay to me.
And yeah, from the drawing that's on the screen right now, to me that massing is pretty good. I'm always concerned, so when you come back, I'm going to want to see the height in relations to the building on the north and the south, both on the front, from the front and from the alley view, because I don't like to see a huge discrepancy in the height. I'm more of a overall look, not exactly how many feet or how many stories. But this side angle looks pretty appropriate. And again, as much space as you can have between the front building and the back building as possible. But overall from this, if it's in line with this, I'm good.
My question will be, I'm fine with the massing as shown in the section, and we'll talk a little bit about character because the massing may change if there's a different roof solution for the high street elevation. So, and we can talk more about that in the character in a moment. So, if the roof does change and there's more verticality there, it may be fine with the old Brazen Head, but its relationship to the neighbors to the south may be something we want to look at. Okay, next question. Okay, here's the conceptual architectural character. So how do we feel about the concept drawings?
So I can start. So I think, as you say, from the office edition, and if I look at the top ones, I don't. It doesn't feel like that's the style I would look at if I'm looking, as you say, as you're looking at Brazen Head, and then you move a bit south. It looks, as you say, it's more utilitarian. It's very, the lines are very clean, and cold's maybe not the right word, but it for me, if I just look at those top rows, it looks a bit out of place from the other structures. Now, if you keep a flat roof, I know it limits a bit how you're going to make the thing look compared to what the houses look like with gables, but I don't know. It feels a little stark if I look at it from just the top. From the character on the top part. In the townhome in the back, the middle one, I actually kind of like what that could look like on the far right side. And then the middle, if the pushed back part looks more like the stuff in the middle, that for me could be interesting. Certainly, if you look from the house across the street on Blacksmith, I mean, you have to just make sure somehow it, as you say, as you push let's say push the housing back and the garage forward, just to make sure it doesn't overwhelm the other side of the street. So from a character standpoint, for me, I'm not crazy about the top, but the townhouses for me is quite okay.
Frank or Amy?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. I mean, it's Gary pretty well said. I think the back end is going to probably match the new stuff going in anyway, so I think it will probably fit in pretty well. The front is, I think, more important next to what was Brazen Head, which is now North High Brewery. But yeah, I think that's what Gary said pretty well.
Okay.
In my opinion, I absolutely love the mid-century modern. I mean, the building that's there is mid-century modern, and I absolutely love the cube, the linear line, you know, the flat roof, all the mid-century characteristics. So you can warm it up with some stone rather than all concrete, because right now it's concrete block, but I love the Office Edition look. And the townhome looks from the rear. I have to disagree with Sean. I absolutely hate the one in the middle because it is not mid-century modern. I just do not like it at all. But if you keep with the mid-century modern, you've got my vote.
All right. Well, I will further confuse things and in two areas. You know, first of all, Mr. Morgan designed the little office building that's off the alley in south of this on High Street, and you took a different approach there, Dan. At that building, you looked at features of buildings in the district and historic structures, and you composed them in a slightly more abstract way, whether it's the material or the slope or the metal roof. And the building that's being built to the north of this site, while the massing may seem a little irregular, it has taken the same, it may be a bit more abstract than Dan's previous project. It's taken the same approach in that it's using exterior materials as a way of tying that building into, and they even suppressed the third floor, so it's going to look like it 2.5 stories from the side, in ways of making it a little bit more barn-like, also to tie it into the tradition. So I struggle a little bit when I look at our code, and it says to me this is all new construction, because once you take that roof off, classification of that building, I think, is tenuous at best, any particular architectural style. So to me, this is new construction in both buildings. So it says in our guidelines, it should be the operative principle similar to existing contributing buildings in the district in which it is located. To me, it's a little bit more like the library there, which is not a contributing building. It also says roof pitch and form should be similar to surrounding buildings. So, you know, I look at the townhouse side, and I liked the middle image because it's a form that it's a clear residential form. I mean, you can't miss it. The simple gable and the centered windows. It's how a child draws a house. So you can't miss the reference, even if the materials are a bit more abstract. And also the modulation of the elevation, the way it's broken up, is responsive to the scale of these little small scale buildings across the street. And I think will be a nice transition from those buildings to this, and then to the Kohut, whatever that building is being built to the north. But the front, I mean, I like the images. So I like particularly the middle image. However, I struggle with how is it appropriate with the standards that we have for the district. So And we've had one applicant come in here in this same block for a conceptual review and make the statement, the historic district is gone, because we asked the same question about what's the relationship of this to contributing structures, what was being proposed. And the comment was, and this is a long time business in the area, well, the historic district is gone. So I worry a little bit too about the message that's communicated in this setting with that elevation. So Mr. Morgan, you're probably really confused on
No,
direction.
I'm going to circle back on that comment about Mr. Alexander, on your comment about the High Street building and that treating it like a new construction, where it needs, this building is deemed, from the consultant's report, it is a contributing building. This mid-century, very simple vernacular, mid-century construction methods, means, materials, methods, and design lines. So I think that in its own right is the contributing architecture that we're trying to continue this building style into, and then bringing that same mid-century simple orthogonal lines with maybe a little bit more contemporary, 21st century design elements into the Blacksmith Alley building. So I think that I hesitate to think of the addition to the existing dental office as a new construction, and thinking that we need to start playing with it to maybe make it a little bit more cottage style, old Dublin design. And my light bulb just burned out, so that's perfect. So I think it's good. It'll be interesting to see how the design comes to fruition, but I just want to make sure that we're not trying to make it look like something that it's not. Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
No, I was just saying I understand your point, and we'll just look forward to in that area seeing. But I understand your point. This conversation may continue, but yeah, I understand. Okay.
Great.
I think we have at least one more question on that list.
Just one more.
Are there any other considerations by the board?
None here.
I think Amy brought it up to just make sure it fits the new code.
My only consideration would be is if this project needs a variance for coverage and it hasn't been developed yet, I would want to see a strong case for what the hardship was requiring the variance for coverage if it needs to go beyond, because it'd be difficult to support a variance for coverage just because someone wants to build more square footage. So that would be the only sort of question or consideration I might have, is if the coverage gets to that great and you need a variance, right, what the hardship and rationale.
Our current plan, as we currently have the site laid out with our lot coverage, we're meeting that 85%.
Okay.
I think we're just under. At this early conceptual stage, I always try to stay about 5% under, just in case we get into that threshold as we're pushing it. I know that those variances or waivers are not easily granted, so I'd like to stay away from that if at all possible.
Dan, do you or Dr. LaPierre have any questions for the board?
I don't any further than what we've already discussed today. This has been great, very informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Say thank you for your time. It's been educational, to say the least. It's kind of fun to watch this process. So look forward to seeing you again and trying to meet your expectations and moving forward.
We do as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
All right. Our next case number 3, is Winans Addition at 4258 South High Street. This is an informal review. It's a request for review and feedback to construct a 1-story, 400 square foot addition on a 0.25 acre site, zone Bridge Street District, Historic South. The site is located southeast of the intersection of South High Street and Spring Hill. Mr. Rayburn will be our presenter, so I'll give you a moment. Looks like the presentation's already up. So do you want to start? Mr. Rayburn?
Yes, can you hear me okay? Hello?
I can.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
go ahead.
I was having some problem with my headphones earlier, so I do apologize if I have any further issues. But good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that introduction. Today, or this evening, I should say, I am presenting Winans Addition. This is an informal review. The site is located southeast of the intersection of South High Street and Spring Hill Lane and is zoned Bridge Street District Historic South. The site is developed with a 2-story commercial building constructed circa 1850. The building has an irregular footprint due to multiple additions over the years. The site contains mature trees, landscaping, and a decorative stone wall along the northern edge of the parking lot to the rear of the site. The surface parking lot has recently been resurfaced and is not currently striped. Should a formal application be pursued, the applicant will need to work with the city to include a parking plan informed by the building uses. In 2017, the City of Dublin City Council adopted a historical and cultural assessment, which documents a variety of community assets, which you're well aware of. This structure was noted as a contributing structure in the historic district. Before I go on to the details of the addition, I do want you to take note of the materials and color of the building. The applicant is proposing to match the color and architectural style of the addition with existing drop siding. And a metal standing seam or shed roof on the building addition will be visible and is proposed in a slate gray color to match the existing standing seam on the building. The applicant is proposing an approximate 400 square foot single story addition to the east elevation or the rear elevation of the building. The addition extends the south building wall to the east, maintaining the existing side yard setback. The addition would allow the applicant to relocate bathrooms and service areas in order to free up more space for seating. It is important to note that the code permits a maximum of 65% lot coverage with an additional 10% permitted for semi-pervious surfaces. The applicant has indicated that the site as it exists today exceeds this limit with a total of approximately 72% pervious lot coverage. With the proposed addition, the lot coverage would increase to approximately 76%. A waiver of lot coverage would be required with a future application for formal review, should the board be supportive of this proposal. There are no new windows proposed on the addition. A new doorway is proposed on the north elevation of the addition for ingress-egress. The height of the addition is not provided. The applicant should provide the height of the addition as measured per code should they move forward with a formal application. The addition is located to the rear of the existing structure and is subordinate to the existing structure itself. Here is a view of the proposed south elevation, and this is a view from the south property line. The proposed addition also requires the relocation of 3 existing HVAC compressor units. The applicant is proposing to relocate this equipment to the east elevation of the new addition and install a living screen wall in between the east elevation of the proposed addition and the rear surface parking lot. The conceptual drawings indicate euonymus, I'm sorry if I butchered that, euonymus as the preferred selection of the living screening wall. Again, should a formal application be pursued, the species of the plant may be a condition of the approval for minor project review. Additionally, the applicant will be required to provide screening on all sides of the compressor units with a future application. Here are some of the discussion questions for the board as they consider this informal review. Upon review and feedback of the informal review by the Architecture Review Board, the applicant may file a formal application for review and approval of a minor project review by the ARB. I'm happy to answer any further questions. The applicant, Mr. Lenz, is also here who can take questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Rayburn? Mr. Lentz, would you like to add to that?
I think he's done a pretty good job of explaining the issues. The only thing that I would like to propose, because there are about 125 different varieties of euonymus, we would want an evergreen euonymus that would be available, and we talk to Oakland Park and find out what they would recommend. I have, from the photograph, which he did not show, I have done the euonymus and framework on my own home, and I think there's a photograph that we've included in the presentation on sheet A2. So if you could bring that up, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, one moment, please. The file's loading. Appreciate your patience.
The only other question I have, since the mechanical equipment needs to be serviced every year, and most of the service is done on the side, it may be difficult to completely screen these units in. I'd certainly like some based information that you people might be able to help me with in terms of some other experiences that you've had on this.
Nikki, can you, or while JM's working on getting the photos up, can you respond to that?
Yeah, so in terms of mechanical screening, we have had a long history of applicants complying with screening mechanicals on all sides, particularly those sides that are visible from public rights of way, which, as you know, this site has two. So staff would be happy to work with you moving forward and potentially provide access from the southern property line. I think there are some solutions that could be explored.
I could see a gate of some kind, but I think it will be very difficult to deal with the planting material because once it's set in place, you can't move those walls. You'll see when the photograph comes up, I think you'll understand what I'm asking.
Yeah, and a gate would be a compliant solution. So in other areas, you could provide plantings, and
Right.
where you need to provide access, you could provide a solid gate.
We could do that very well, solid or some kind of because I don't want to cut back the air distribution through there or the mechanical system will go haywire. I think it's coming up there.
Oh, thanks, JM.
Okay. Now what?
Well,
Whoops. We almost had it.
I do apologize. I don't know why this is, the network's not liking my computer. Okay, here we go.
Okay, if you look at the picture, you'll see there's a grid of wood in lathwork, and above it is a horizontal band at the 6-foot level. Can you see that on the right side? Right side of there you go. Over time, the euonymus grows up, and you can see the euonymus, and we trim it every year. The euonymus has grown up at least 2 feet above that 8-foot fence. And I think we're going to need that because by the time the building is put out and the stone wall back there, it's going to wind up with a wall that's at least 6 feet, maybe even taller in order to cover the mechanicals. But you can see, I can bend the corner, but I'd need some sort of a, if you think of the mechanical equipment sitting in front of that, I'd need some way of getting in on the sides because the mechanical service is all on the side of those air handlers.
I have a question. When you're talking about mechanicals, are you talking about the AC units like what we see in the picture on the right, to the right of the door? Those are what are being relocated?
Right. Those are the
So
those are
those to
the-
me are like 3 feet tall. Why would we need something 6 foot tall?
no, under the new handicap, under the new energy code, you'll find those units are a lot bigger than they were. Those are old-fashioned units. The new-
Okay, so you're putting the units themselves that you're putting in are close to 6 feet tall?
The units probably are running 4.5, 5 feet. But I mean, we haven't designed it yet. We have to get our PM&E people involved in order to get an exact unit. But they are much bigger than the unit that you see.
Okay, thank you.
From your drawings, it appeared that the units were supported on a platform.
I don't
And then-
know precisely at this moment where that wall lies in terms of the addition. So I wanted to show that we may be having to hang those units out on some kind of a platform.
And because I could understand why this would have to be tall if the starting point for your screening wall is a couple feet below because the grade change.
That's correct.
Then I understand why you're talking about a 6 foot height. So potentially, because it'd only be maybe 4 feet above the upper grade.
That's correct. But we've got the 2 feet of the stone wall too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks for the clarification. Before we go through the questions, does anybody have any general questions for Mr. Lentz or JM?
I
have. Oh, go ahead, Amy.
I was gonna say, my question is, and when you look on like Google Street View, and actually in the one photograph, there is some limestone wall along between the existing parking and the yard. Is that part of the historic wall that runs east-west along the alley?
Yes. So it goes along the northern edge of the lot itself.
Yeah.
This tenant space is on the southern section of the building, so it wouldn't be near that wall, so to speak.
But then there is a limestone. It looks at least I don't know, 5 or 6 courses high that runs north-south between the grass and the parking lot. You see it in the photo there.
Right here.
Yeah. So what is the applicant? Are they touching or doing anything with that wall then?
Absolutely not. We don't have a precise dimension on it yet.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify if you were getting near that wall.
We're trying to avoid it.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. On the photograph in the right, there's a projection or bump to the right. Is that and it has a different kind of siding. Is that an addition that was an earlier addition?
That was put on. That was an earlier addition. It has different kind of siding, and you can see where the original building was, and then there have been a number of additions that have been added to it.
Yeah, I can address that if you want. You can see on the picture to the left there, the one building has kind of painted shingles, okay, and then most of the rest of the building has hardy plank that's been painted. If you look on the front, part of the building I don't know if I have a picture of it, is shingled on the left side, and then it transitions into a clapboard on the right side. And I think the building was renovated in the early 80s, maybe. And at that time, they put the addition on the back, which is what you're seeing in the picture on the right. and then they recladded most of the building in a in like a hardy plank type of board.
So the proposed addition is not butting up against original siding. That siding across the back, not the shakes, but the horizontal side.
Yes, it's on the back there. That's the 80s edition. It's butting up against that. Yes, you can see that one has like a. If you're at the building, you see on the left, you see there's like a stone-ish foundation.
Mhm.
And if you go to the building, or the picture on the right, the building on the left, it's got more of like a block foundation on that, and so it'll be butting up against that. And that's where the newer.
And I probably didn't ask my question very clearly. Is the wall that your addition is touching, that back wall, that flat surface? So in the photo to the right, it's the area to the left. Now, is that siding original, or is that siding that's been installed at some later date?
Okay, so you're talking about the picture on the right, correct?
Yeah, and the portion to the left of that, yeah.
And first, that's 19 whatever 80s ish
Okay.
siding on that building. Yes.
Okay, that thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the first question for us was, do we propose or do we support the location? And we can, yeah, do we support the location of the proposed addition?
Yes, for me.
Yes.
Okay, I haven't heard Frank, but I support that as well.
Sorry, yeah, I said yes. Sorry, I must have just walked over.
Okay. How about the mass scale materials of the addition, including the living screen wall?
Again, I support. I mean, it's subordinate. It's quite small, let's say, and it's and how it looks, and like you say, it doesn't end up all the way to the stone wall. So for me, conceptually, it looks okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yes, I support it. The screen wall is questionable. We just need more details on that. But yes, the addition, massing, scale, materials.
And I agree. I agree. One question before we answer that. One question for JM. I don't think we changed the lot coverage in the plans for the change in code. Did we change the lot coverage requirement as a part of the proposed zoning changes?
That is a great question. I'd like to defer to Nikki for that, please.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. So the short answer is no. The proposed lot coverage in the rezoning is 65%.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Feelings about this?
For me, first, I would be supportive. I mean, the area that they're putting this on. I mean, I know we don't like to give too many waivers here, but it is more or less that wouldn't be difficult to use if you didn't do something else with it. And so, I mean, just short answer is yes, I would be supportive of that.
I would want to know how many current parking spots they have, and if the place is overparked, I would request they take out parking in order to get closer to the lot coverage. If they exceed the needed parking spots.
I agree with that. I would like to see also calculations whether this addition is requiring more parking, but I definitely wouldn't want to see the parking increase. So I could be supportive. I think Amy makes a good point. We need to look at the parking requirements as well as the building coverage. Other considerations? Mr. Lentz, do you have any additional questions for you and Mr. DeBerry?
Yeah, from my perspective, so I guess, and which is, I think where we're going to land on is the big issue is the coverage and the parking, because sounds like that is the one thing we'd have to address more than anything right now. Amy, so to your point, you're suggesting that we look at what is required for the existing building and with the addition and seeing what we have right now and how that matches up?
Yeah, so if
plus or minus, and then
code says you need 10 parking spots, but you have 14 out there, I would say remove 4 parking spots and get closer to your lot coverage than give you the waiver.
I see. Okay.
That would be my preference.
To satisfy the 400 square feet, that's roughly 2 cars.
Yeah. Well, and then I guess to that point, Amy, too, one thing we had talked about is that what if, are you saying to get back into the current code? Because right now we don't meet the current code. We're at 72 and at 65. Or are you saying get back to 72?
I would say to get back to break even. So you're adding 400 square feet to the lot coverage. And so let's say you're overparked by 4 spaces. So you can remove 400 square feet of asphalt. So it's a net. So you're,
oh, I see.
you're the same.
Can I ask a question, Amy? Part of your driveways actually go across his property. Can I take those out?
Well, I don't know how many you need. What I'm saying is come back with us and tell us how much parking is required for your building and tell us how much parking you have.
We'll be
and
happy
that would
to do
impact
that.
Yeah.
I see lot coverage.
And I think that could be a mitigating factor too. If you need to have additional lot coverage to provide access for an adjacent lot, clearly that's a mitigating factor, and you could be being penalized for a service you're providing an adjacent lot. So I think we just need more information about the parking. So, but I think we're generally supportive of what you want to do.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Our next case is 87 South High Street. This is an informal review. It's a request for a review and feedback to demolish a detached structure, modify an existing building, and construct a 2-story, 2,000 square foot addition on a 0.11 acre site zoned Bridge Street District Historic South. The site is located west of South High Street, approximately 75 feet north of the intersection with Penny Hill Lane. Mr. Ridge will be our presenter, and it looks like he already has the presentation up. So Chase, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. As was mentioned, this is a request for informal review providing non-binding feedback on a proposed street in the historic district. The site is highlighted in yellow here. It is approximately 1/10 of an acre in size. It is situated on the west side of South High Street, north of Penny Hill Lane. This kind of provides a zoomed in site aerial view for you all. As you can see here, the site is in the middle of a larger shared parking arrangement with the property immediately to the north as well as the property to the south. It has approximately 30 feet of frontage on South High Street as well as on Mill Lane. There we go. This provides a lot of surrounding context for your awareness. Highlighted in green is the property to the north. So you can see that on the right side of your screen here, and then indicated by the blue star is the property to the south, which is going to be that photo in the bottom right corner. And then additionally, this photo was taken from the southern access point to the larger shared parking lot. You can see the property in question on the right side of the photo there. These photos provide some of the context for some of the existing conditions of the site. So on the left is obviously the front of the existing structure as viewed from South High Street. And then on the right is the view of that same structure as well as the detached shed from the parking lot. The structure is a Greek Revival structure constructed in the 1840s. It is formed with a simple front roof and situated on top of a stone foundation. The Historic and Cultural Assessment does list this as a contributing structure. It good remarks for the 7 integrity indicators, some of which include design, setting, location, and workmanship. So what you see here is the proposed site plan. You may recall from the aerial in the previous slide that the existing structure is on the far eastern third of the site. The parking is in the middle third of the site, and then there is a lawn and some vegetation on the western third of the site. What the applicant is proposing here is a rectangular addition to the existing historic structure, a connector piece toward the middle of the site, as well as an interior courtyard, and then a larger rear addition to the rear of the home, as well as the applicant has provided some initial lot coverage estimates. It appears as though the proposal as shown today is close to the lot coverage, permitted lot coverage is, and could potentially, with finalizing of plans, actually exceed the lot coverage allowances. Staff is recommending that the board consider whether or not a waiver to the lot coverage requirement would be appropriate in that case. I'll quickly run through each of the elevations. So what you're seeing here is the proposed east elevation. The applicant is proposing to largely retain the character of this elevation. They are proposing to replace the double hung window, which is be the left of this image or the southern portion of the structure, with a window to match the window on the northern half of the structure. They are proposing to retain the double entry, although new doors are to be proposed, and the applicant is also proposing new light fixtures. What you're seeing here is the west elevation. So this really encompasses the larger rear addition. This one, like the existing structure, is formed with a front gable form. There are shed dormers on both the north and south sides of the addition, which you'll see in greater detail in the next few slides. You can also see there are 2 single car bays provided with access provided from Mill Lane. The applicant is proposing the addition be primarily white with black detailing in the window trim, garage doors, so on and so forth. The applicant is also proposing what appears to be a brick cladding for the majority of the rear addition. So this is the north elevation. As I had mentioned earlier, the addition really consists of 3 components, which you can start to see in greater detail here. So moving left to right or east to west, there's the rectangular addition to the existing structure. This is approximately 340 square feet in size. And that's where you'll see the first of 2 stone chimneys as well. The middle piece, kind of the elevation dips, is the connector piece. So that's approximately 140 square feet in size, and kind of outlines really where the interior courtyard is going to be. And then moving further to the right or to the west is the rear addition. So approximately 2,000 square feet in size, but that is including the 2-car garage as well. So as was mentioned, you can see there's 2 stone chimneys visible on this end, and the interior courtyard is most visible from the north elevation. And then on the furthest right portion of this image, you can see the shed dormers proposed for the rear addition. So many of the same details apply to this elevation, although on this elevation you will also notice on the rear addition an increased fenestration. There are several more windows. There's a pedestrian door as well. And then you'll also notice the shed dormer on the rear addition. And then the most difference on this elevation is going to be that stone connector, the middle piece between structure and the larger addition to the rear of the property. I also provided some conceptual renderings for your consideration, and provided conceptual renderings of the interior as well, the interior courtyard. The applicant also provided some character images. They are going for a more contemporary look. So these are of some of the elements you would see on the addition. So outlined here are 4 discussion questions for the board's consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions you all may have, and the applicant is also in attendance tonight. Thank you.
Any questions for Chase? I have one, Chase. What you may have said it. What is the percentage coverage requirement on this property?
Yeah. So for this building type, it would be 65% impervious permitted with an additional 10% semi-pervious permitted.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Would the applicant, Mr. Stout, would you like to add anything to the presentation? I think you're on mute. I'm not able to hear you.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Chase, and thank you, board. I'm not sure I have too much to add. That summarizes a lot of what was going on. We do have a survey that's being conducted, and we'll have some more accurate measurements on the distances away from the building to ensure access for the adjacent tenants. So we are going to receive a little bit more information, and then just wanted to highlight the objective of the project. It was really to maximize this smaller lot with this live-work dwelling and really take advantage of all the walkable amenities available in downtown Dublin. So we are pushing the limits of the lot coverage in order to create the most high-end live-work dwelling possible for this narrow site. So otherwise, just looking forward to any feedback and sort of improving it from where we're at currently.
Any questions for the applicant? I have a question. The floor plans for the interior of the existing building, at least the drawings I saw, showed clean slate. What's going on? How's that going to be used?
It is going to be the front section. There's currently an existing office in the front section and an existing restroom. So we're going to maintain a front little office for the live workspace and really expand the kitchen and dining area towards the back of the space. And we really haven't got into the details of that yet, about the specifics, what kind of fridge and where that goes.
I'm assuming that division is down the center about the 2 doors?
Yes.
Okay.
For the front office, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
All right, well, maybe since there are no additional questions, maybe we should see the questions for us to address. Nikki, if you could put those up.
Yeah, I can bring those up. Just one moment.
Oh, okay, sorry, Chase.
No, you're fine.
Okay, the first question, do we support the detached shed and the shed that's leaning on the back of the house? Do we support the demolition of those?
I can start from the first. I mean, I guess maybe it was a question for the applicant. I mean, what's the purpose to demo? I mean, we have in the code. There's the 4 reasons why you demo, and I'm assuming we're demoing it because it's in the way of what you're going to propose, right? I don't know if it's in bad shape or if there's something wrong with the shed, or the reason you want to demo it is really because it sits in the way of the project. Probably should have asked that in the last section.
It sits in the way of the project in order to create the interior kitchen will not fit. A usable functional kitchen for today's family will not fit in the current building. So we have to make it a little bit bigger just to get a good kitchen in there that can function and serve people. So the existing structure has to expand somewhat. And then we found, couldn't find a record of that shed being listed somewhere as saying it was a part of something else. So we thought it was appropriate to at least propose this plan as a starting point.
Okay. And I have to say, I guess we'll have to go to the next few questions to see what we have whether you support tearing it down.
Yeah, because I want to hear, Amy's the historian. I want to hear about that little shed and her opinions about the removal of that.
The applicant's not going to like it, but I totally disagree with any demolition of the shed or the additions. They're both historic components of the existing building. And unless you can meet the criteria for demolition, which I don't think you can because you're asking it for convenience, I do not support it at all. If you take the square footage of that addition and the shed, it's such a small building, those are actually, to you, they're very small, but they're a large component of this. And this is an extremely significant historic building in our district because most of the buildings are vernacular. They have no architectural style or details, or very limited, and this one does. It's a unique gem that I just totally disagree with demolishing those.
Frank, your feelings. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, it's actually, Chase, do you have your photo of the sheds again? Can you bring that up?
Yeah, give me one moment.
Yeah, take your time. Well, what I was going to say while I was bringing it up is I'm pretty much with Amy leaning on this, is that the reasons given for demolition of the shed don't really fall in line with the reasons of why you would need to do that in a historic district. Let's hoping the photo would get up. If not,
there it is.
There we go. So you were proposing both that simple A-frame shed and then the one to the right of it as well, I think.
Yes, that is correct.
I mean, I'm not sure how old the little shed is, but definitely to the one to the right looks like it's original to the building. That'd be my guess. It probably came off of a kitchen of some sort in that time. So yeah, I would go leaning with Amy, saying that that is part of the structure, and there's only so many structures in Old Dublin, especially of that age. That's one of the oldest ones. So you're kind of like picking on one of the number one buildings in the whole district. That's it.
My comments is, when I looked at the little building, if we're looking at the photo on the right and we're looking at that little building, I mean, you look at that siding, and so that's the drop siding, and then you look at the foundation. There's a stone foundation, and then there's a type of concrete that was poured on that foundation. And I've seen that it's a kind of concrete I've seen in buildings that were built around the 20s. So there's some age on that little structure. Now that siding doesn't seem to match the siding on the structure that faces High Street, but that's a pretty neat little old building. And we've approved the demolition of some detached structures behind, but they've typically been block garages that were maybe 40s, 50s, didn't have the integrity that this has. So I wish there was some creative way to incorporate this, and if it becomes a pantry in the kitchen, or some way to incorporate it, or does the courtyard configuration change and it becomes an object sitting in the courtyard? But I particularly hate to see that little thing move. So that, I think we've all kind of chimed in about that.
And to Gary, to your point, that so the shed roof addition and that shed are probably at least 100 years old.
Okay.
So because yeah, and they are part of the history of that building.
Okay. The next question, I think, dealt with the form, massing, and I think also we can talk a little bit about the concept too on the site. That's not listed in the questions, but I think that's inherent in this second question.
I can't remember what was the second. That's the second one is the massing, right? And then support
Yeah.
that. Okay. I mean, I can start. I mean, when I first looked at the drawing, and then I actually had to go downtown and just kind of stand to the side of it and look at it. And for me, it's when I just looked at it and tried to superimpose what it was, just looking at the drawing and looking at the space, the scale looks not appropriate in that spot. Just two reasons. One, I mean, if I look at this, the massing of that building going west really puts like a big barrier or a big wall sitting sort of in that area. And if you look in those structures back there, the parking lots, and to the south, I think, is a kind of a barn-looking building and another barn-looking building. So if I look at the kind of the scale and how it fits in the space, it doesn't feel that it's continuous with what sits there right now. And then as you look at the height, it feels big because it's really the same. Well, if you look at the front view, it looks like it extends beyond the existing building. If you're looking west. So just generally from the first concept I have, it looks out of place in the space. It feels too big, and then it looks too tall. So when you put it together within that small building that's on the alley back there, it's going to be quite close to that, and it's bisecting the space. So my first thought is the massing was not correct for where it sits in Old Dublin.
I've tried to let everybody else talk before I do, but since everybody's a little slow here, I'll chime in. I like the concept. I think the concept makes a lot of sense in this kind of in a historic setting where you separate the historic structure from a new construction. And so I think it's very logical, and you join them with a common exterior space, which I also think is positive. And I appreciate the way that they took advantage of the grade change to get the heights that were needed without having a ridge height taller than the existing building. So I think that's a pretty thoughtful use of what the site provides and not trying to overwhelm the existing building. It's also logical to build on the alleys. So when you go down now, most of the structure, so it's a logical infill approach. It is bigger than the other structures on the alley, but on one hand, they're limited by the square footage of the existing building. And if it's harder to add on to that existing building, there may not be a choice but to have something slightly bigger at the rear. Now, some of the issues, like I like the stone wall, but changing material certainly helps break the mass down on that one elevation. But maybe it has to be completely transparent and a completely glass link that then it breaks the mass up even more. But I personally, I'm supportive if the concept can be applied while being a little bit more sensitive to the back of the original building.
So our guidelines say that any addition has to be subordinate to the main building. And so to me, everything you're requesting to build is an addition because it's all attached to the main building. So if you look at everything you want to build, it's twice as big as the main building, over twice as big. So to me, it's not an appropriate addition. Also, the fact that I don't agree with the demolition of the stuff on the back. Now, I totally think you can put a second structure on this lot at the rear by the alley and separate it from the building at the front. I would totally support a detached structure on this lot, but I do not support an addition that is twice the size of the original building.
I guess I'll chime in here at the end. Gary wrapped it up nicely at the end, talking about he'd like to see something done that kept the character of his little back buildings in the back, because they are important to keep, being that we're in a historic district. And I see what Amy's saying about it has to be subordinate to the original structure. And I think what is helpful with that is keeping that height down in the back so that you can stand in the front or be on the front on High Street and not see a mass building behind it sticking up high. But yeah, as to how you do that, that's into the architect's realm of, your design, what you come up with. But I like what Amy said about, do we keep it subordinate to the original front structure?
But maybe to follow up on Gary, because I did like, as you say, just take the massing and, as you say, Gary, maybe something that keeps the connector somehow more subordinate. It looks broken up a bit more. I think you're right. Maybe it's that wall and that height of that wall that it makes it feels like it's a wall. Maybe there's something inside of that connector.
I have a question for Amy. I know we've had this discussion about, and I think I want to have this conversation amongst us because I think it can help the applicants. We've had this discussion about subordinate doesn't always mean smaller. When that was language was going to be changed in the code. I can see a way of having a addition that has a larger footprint at the rear than the original, but being perhaps more subordinate than this is. Do you think that's feasible? Amy, I can't quite hear you. You may still be on mute.
Sorry. I don't envision how you can make a physical connection with not, the way they're presenting it, they want to enlarge the existing building, then make a physical connection to a second building. And as presented, I just don't see that working. If the connection is more transparent and not as solid, I don't know if that makes sense. It might work. But again, the simplest answer, which is you probably don't want, is just to clearly detach it.
Yeah.
It's going to be very tricky. And I think I mean, you're welcome to try to figure it out and bring ideas. I don't foresee too many options of how to attach it. It's such a tiny, tiny main building.
The reason for my question is I'm trying to perhaps see if there's some direction that the applicant can have that we feel, and so here's the second part of that. If more square footage was placed in the addition to compensate, but the mass was broken up, so more of the square footage was shifted from the addition on the back into this building at the rear. Essentially, the courtyard could be the same square footage it is now, but the rear mass was broken up into a series of volumes. Do you think, from your perspective, that a solution could be proposed that would still be subordinate to that?
Honestly, I think my concern is not so much with the size of the rear addition. It's the connection. It's that solid wall. Yeah. If it was an open courtyard and it wasn't, I mean, again, separation of space, it's just such a small building. But if you can be creative and come back with ideas that preserves, and you really can still feel that same small sense of the original building, I mean, I'd certainly consider it. I just don't know how you could do it without physically separating them.
Well, yes, all of that stuff getting added in is very difficult. And we did, on the tactic of subordination, we did try to use less ornamentation and let the ornamentation of the front building. And certainly from the streetscape, you can't see any of the additions because the other buildings are so close to our building. So from that South High Street, any visibility to any of the back structure is simply non-existent. You have no sense of any other building behind our structure as you're walking down the street. And it really only reveals itself when you go back behind the alley or in the parking lots.
But this is a very busy alley and a very used alley. And you'll see the back and sides of this building. And with what you have proposed, we completely lose the rear of the original building. It's gone. We don't see any of that anymore. And I don't want to lose that, all of that.
I think, Chase, we have one final question to respond.
I was gonna say, one other question. Do maybe the architects can help. Is there an actual definition of subordinate? So in other words, does subordinate necessarily mean size? I can see us.
No, to the contrary, I believe there's something in there that says it doesn't have to be exactly size. To the contrary, I think it could be subordinate in ornamentation and coloration, just many other factors. Height, even what we used on this case.
Yeah, I could definitely see that as well. And it's one of those, subordinate also becomes a word that is open to interpretation unless we have an actual, black and white definition that says what subordinate really means.
Subordinate also kind of means secondary. So when you look at this, you want to know that the old portion, like that is the main building.
Right.
And that's what we want to preserve.
And then, I think
it's such a tiny building to be a main building. So it's a tough task.
Because I see Amy's point. I also see John's point here of like, if you keep the front building with the ornamentation, your eyes go towards that more direct building. Unfortunately, you do lose a lot of it from the back. You don't see it anymore from the back. But also the alley is subordinate to the main street, right? We're using that same word. So, I see where you're coming from. It's a real hard one right now.
Yeah, and Frank, just to answer your question, and my interpretation has always been, and when I've been before architectural review boards, it's been pretty common that subordinate doesn't necessarily mean size. There's so many other factors that can allow. And I think I see Nikki wants to say something here, so I'll be quiet and let Nikki add to this.
So sorry to interject. I was furiously flipping through some pages, but our proposed rezoning includes additional definitions. And we do have a definition that's proposed for subordinate. And it says a building or structure that is secondary or incidental to the primary building, structure, or use on a lot.
So really, it doesn't say anything about size. It's actually more towards purpose in that regard.
And so it's important to keep in mind that the definitions in the code apply to every single zoning district in the city of Dublin, even outside of the architectural review district. So when we added this definition specifically for the architectural review district, we had to compose something that would be applicable in other contexts, which is probably why it's not specific to the architectural review district. But I think
right, because it would limit you too much in other areas.
Yeah, so I think what's important here is that it's incidental to the primary structure, building, or use. So it needs to be incidental and secondary, meaning that whatever the second use or the second building on the lot, it would need to be quote unquote subordinate.
And Frank, for some context, the little office building that was built behind the structure to the south of this property, which is, and Amy may feel that, and the both of you, all three of you may feel that the previous board made a mistake in approving that, but that was considered subordinate to the existing structure, even though it's bigger in terms of square footage. Now, it does not have the connector. So you clearly see it as a separate building. But there's an example where there was an interpretation of something that has a larger square footage, but was deemed subordinate to, and a lot of the details are completely different. And that was that. So following along with your idea, but just provide a little bit of context there.
And to your point, Gary, if this rear structure was detached and at the rear end of the lot, I would be okay with it in concept. So because it's the connection that's what's causing the problem. Because connected as an addition, I just do not see the way it's designed or how you could design it so it would be subordinate to. But I would be okay detached.
I think that's really helpful.
Amy, could I ask a quick question? I'm not sure if we can flip to the slide that has all of the conceptual buildings on it that we use for part of our design. But in regard to the connector, would you support the image on the far right corner, the far right bottom corner, like it's a glass connector? Would you support that from building to building?
It's possible, depending on its overall size. I mean, and again, what you're doing to the back of the existing building. So, I mean, that probably gets your closest. If you want some, I just don't see it happening, but that would be the closest.
Okay.
But for me, I think having something that doesn't make that full wall as you look north, south, either one. For me, that also helps visually for me as you look from one of the parking lot or from the alley, that it's just there, right? And it kind of stands out different from the other structures that sit behind the buildings. So something more subdued there. Still doesn't address Amy's point about how it's going to butt up to the back of the existing building.
Should we address the final question? I think we probably should.
What's the final question?
All right, Chase. Is Chase still here? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Do we support the conceptual architecture, the exterior materials, and material transitions? And I think here we may want to speak a little bit more. We have to some extent about the materials, the way they're used, maybe the scale of things relative to the original building.
I think we already kind of covered some of that with the scale conversation we had in depth. So I'm, no problem with that. I don't think there was any issue I really have with the materials offhand. I'm remembering. I don't know, Amy, do you want to chime in on the materials?
I would say conceptually that 1.5 story section to the rear, again, detached, the materials, the design, conceptually, I'm okay with.
Same for me. I mean, for me, other than it being so imposing, somewhere to soften that, I think is okay. But generally, if I just look at the building, for me, it's okay. The far west building, for me, I don't see anything unusual in its design. And actually, as Gary said, I like the garage, how it fits into the alleyway. So I think that's actually looks interesting from the alley side.
And just a couple of details. I don't think we typically have approved door replacements like that in the original building. So the proposal to change the front doors to all glass doors, I think we would have a problem based on what our code says and the way we treat historic structures. I think changing the window, the glass, I don't know if that's real glass block or the plastic alternative in the right. I think changing that back to what we believe was originally there makes sense. I couldn't tell from the elevation drawings and the existing site elevations if you were proposing to modify any of those openings, and I would not modify the openings on the sides of the existing house, regardless of what the functional changes are inside. There are ways to do both, to accommodate functions where you may not want a window, but still keep that window on the outside. If new things are touching the original building, I think the scale of what touches that could be different than, and I particularly looked at the chimney, that blunt, massive chimney that's a part of the addition to the existing building. I think that could be problematic. But so, and I agree with the material. I like the material palette that was selected elsewhere. So that's the feedback I have. Do either of you have? Well, first of all, I want to sum up before you ask, if you have any additional questions. You can come back to this board as many times as you want for conceptual reviews, and the presentations can be simpler if they don't have to be extremely elaborate, but feel free to come back with other thoughts and ideas. You should not feel like this is the end tonight. Do either of you have any questions for us?
Just in regards to the previous question about the waiver on the lot coverage, was that, I'm not sure if we hit that.
Good point.
I think in general, we don't like to support waivers on lot coverage just because we know these lots are small, but that's also the nature and character of the neighborhood. So, the minute I say no, there's always going to be a reason I could think yes. But in general, I would say no, we don't like doing waivers. We like sticking with the rules that are written for a reason, I guess, simply put.
I agree with Frank. In general, the answer is no, unless there's some extreme circumstance because of the best way to locate something on a lot or the parking or, but in general, if you're working from a clean slate and building a new building detached from the back of your thing, there shouldn't be a problem.
And I'm the same, trying not to avoid the waiver, yeah?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be hard to make the case of what the hardship is on this particular property for any kind of waiver. Also, considering how open some of the adjacent lots are near you, it would seem like something that would be unfair that might be granted to you. Any other questions for us?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Going back to number 1 on the slide regarding the shed and the potential demolition of the shed, I'm wondering if the board can provide feedback on any possibility. So I'm not aware of what the 4 reasons are, the appropriate reasons are for demolition, but us removing the shed isn't just opportunity for us. It actually is completely dilapidated. It would need to be taken down and rebuilt. So there's like an electrical conduit that's from one building to the next that is certainly not to code. It's moldy, it's falling apart. So I feel like if we did keep it, we would have to tear it down and rebuild it. It's not even usable. There's storage out there, but it's very, and so I don't know if it's appropriate for someone to come out and look at it. I don't know what the process, but it's really not just for opportunity for us. It just needs to be taken down. So I don't know what we should do with it.
Well, planning staff can give you the criteria and the process. And generally speaking, you'll need a structural analysis, a structural engineering report to assess the condition of it. We want an existing conditions report. In general, there's also a financial component as well. But the planning staff has all the criteria for demolition.
Okay.
Yeah, Shannon and John, I can provide that to you both after this meeting.
Thank you, Chase.
Anything else for us? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you all. Much appreciated. Take care.
Good night. Okay. Next case. I think we have communications.
I was gonna say, don't say next case. I was like,
Surprise! No, just kidding. No, I just had two quick things, and I don't know if Nikki had anything, and then she can chime in as well. So I sent an email to all of you about the status of the code and the guidelines, and the code is proceeding to council for the 2 February meetings, along with the area rezoning. Planning Commission reviewed that. I think Kathy also sent you an email saying how complimentary Planning Commission was for all your hard work. So that's moving forward. And then the guidelines, Nikki is finishing making those changes on our end. And again, we pushed that out just a little bit to make sure that we have enough internal review time, but then also to give Amy and Gary a chance to chime in and be aware and cognizant of their time as that permits. So that in the end, it should line up on the back end, because the code obviously takes 30 days to be effective. So the guidelines should be within really close time frame of being approved by council at the same time as the effective date of the ordinance. So I just wanted to share that with you, and for anybody else that might be watching, just questioning where that was. So we're moving through the process for that. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Then the only other thing is that Chase Ridge is going to start joining this meeting with Nikki. And the two of them are going to be your sort of new main contacts for ARB. Not that I won't be here sometimes and obviously paying attention, but just wanted to let you know we're making a shift just to give some opportunity to Chase to be engaged further with ARB and his interest with your work as well. So I just wanted to let you all know that we're pivoting a little bit here, but you're in great hands, as I'm sure you know. So that's really all I had. Nikki, did you have anything else?
Yeah, just one final, communication item. We are preparing an annual report for February, and that will be Chase's inaugural contribution to the board. So we're very excited to share that with you all, and then of course would welcome comments, because the board, the annual report is really supposed to be reflective of the board's achievements over the past year, as well as goals for 2021. And then that annual report is forwarded to City Council as an information only item. So if you've not provided a bio for that annual report per my email, if you could provide that sooner rather than later, that would be great. And we look forward to bringing that forward. So with that, I don't have anything else other than have a good evening.
All right, I think we should adjourn this meeting. Nikki, thank you. Thank you. I don't know if Judy listens to this whole thing or if you tape it, but if she's listening, thank Judy and Chase and everybody. So
great. Have a good night.
Okay, good night.